I thought my stepmom was being considerate when she asked me to wait. Grief makes people fragile, and I wanted to believe she was protecting us both. It took a full year for me to realize that her request wasn't about healing at all. It was about control. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 27 years old. And this is the story of how waiting 1 year before moving into my late father's house exposed everything my stepmom never wanted me to see. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. My dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. One day he was texting me about fixing the porch railing, and the next day I was standing in a hospital hallway signing papers I didn't understand. I was his only biological child. My mom died when I was 9. And my dad remarried when I was 15. That's when Sandra entered our lives. She was polite, organized, and always a little distant. Not cruel. Not warm either. We existed side by side for years without ever fully connecting. When my dad died, she cried in public and went silent in private. I chalked it up to shock. The house mattered. It was the house I grew up in. The place where my mom's height marks were still penciled into the doorframe. Where my dad taught me how to ride a bike and burned every grilled cheese he ever made. In his will, he left the house to both of us joint ownership until I was ready to decide what came next. At least, that's what the lawyer said, a week after the funeral. Sandra asked to talk. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one my dad refinished himself years ago. She folded her hands and spoke softly. Lauren, I think it's best if you wait a year before moving back in. I blinked. Wait? Yes, she said calmly. We're both grieving. Emotions are high. A year will give us space to heal before making big decisions. It sounded reasonable. Responsible even. I hesitated. Where would I stay? You have your apartment, she replied. Your life. This house. It's still very raw for me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say this was my home too. But grief has a way of making you second-guess your instincts. I didn't want to be the selfish daughter who pushed her stepmom aside weeks after burying her father. Okay, I said quietly.
A year.
She smiled. Relief flickered across her face too fast to be comforting. The months that followed were strange. Sandra rarely called. When I did stop by to pick up mail or old photos, she was polite but guarded. Rooms started changing. Furniture moved. Paint samples appeared. My dad's workshop was suddenly locked. Just reorganizing, she'd say. I needed a fresh start. I told myself it was normal, 6 months in. I noticed my name was removed from the mailbox, 9 months in. My dad's tools were gone. By month 11. I barely recognized the house from the outside. New plants. New curtains. New locks. That's when something inside me shifted. One afternoon I drove by unannounced. Sandra's car was in the driveway, along with another I didn't recognize. A man in his 20s was carrying boxes inside, laughing, comfortable, like he belonged there, when Sandra saw me. Her smile faltered. Oh, Lauren. You should have called. Who's that? I asked, nodding toward the house. She followed my gaze. That's Tyler. The name landed heavy. My son, she added. I stared at her. Why is he moving in? She hesitated just a fraction too long. He needed a place. Just temporary. The same word she'd used on me. I left without arguing, but my hands shook the entire drive home. That night, I pulled out my dad's will, the copy I'd been given and never really read. That's when I saw the line. Sandra hadn't mentioned in the event of joint ownership disputes. Residency establishes. Primary claim. My chest tightened. The year she asked me to wait suddenly made sense, and I realized I hadn't been giving her space to grieve. I had been giving her time to erase me. I read that line in the will over and over, my eyes tracing the words until they blurred. Residency establishes primary claim. It sounded harmless on its own, like a technical detail buried in legal language. But paired with Sandra's calm request to wait a year, it felt deliberate, calculated. I called the law office the next morning. The receptionist recognized my name immediately and transferred. Me to the attorney who had handled my dad's estate. Mr. Henson, his voice was professional but kind. The way people get when they sense they're about to deliver news someone won't like. Yes, he confirmed after I read the clause aloud. That provision is meant to prevent stalemates. If two parties jointly own a property and one resides there continuously, they can petition for primary occupancy rights after a year. Primary occupancy, I repeated. Does that mean ownership?
It can, he said carefully.
Especially if the other party doesn't contest it or establish residency themselves. My throat went dry. So if I waited a year like she asked, she could claim the house, he finished. Or at least a controlling interest. I hung up feeling sick. All those months. The polite distance. The renovations. The new locks. It wasn't grief. It was strategy. I drove over that afternoon, anger buzzing under my skin. Tyler's car was there again. When I knocked, Sandra answered with the same practiced smile. "Lauren," she said. "Is everything okay?" "No," I replied. "We need to talk." Her smile faded just a little. "Now isn't a great time." "I think it is," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled different. New candles. New furniture, Polish. Even the air felt unfamiliar, like I'd walked into someone else's life. Tyler was in the living room, feet up on the coffee table my dad built.
He looked up, surprised. "Hey," he said casually.
"You must be Lauren." I didn't answer him. My focus stayed on Sandra. "You told me to wait a year because you were grieving," I said. "But you knew about the residency clause." Her eyes flicked away. "I didn't hide anything from you." "You omitted it," I shot back. "That's not the same thing." She folded her arms. "I assumed the lawyer explained it." "He didn't," I said. "You did." Tyler stood up, suddenly uncomfortable. "Mom, it's fine," she said quickly. "Lauren's upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm angry." She sighed. "You have your own place. Your own life. Tyler doesn't." "That's not my responsibility," I replied. "This is my home too." Sandra's expression hardened. "Your father wanted what was best for everyone. You don't get to speak for him," I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Your father worried about you. About whether you'd settle down.
He thought stability mattered."
"And you decided that meant cutting me out?" I asked. "I decided," she said evenly, "that the house should stay with someone who needs it." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You mean your son?"
Tyler shifted.
"I didn't ask for this," he muttered. I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't smug. He looked confused. Maybe even guilty. But that didn't change what was happening. "I'm moving in," I said. Sandra stiffened. "That's not necessary."
"It is," I replied.
"And I'm not asking." Her voice rose. "You can't just show up and—" "I can," I said. "I'm an owner." She stared at me, measuring. "You'll regret turning this into a fight." "I regret trusting you," I said quietly. That night, I packed a suitcase and drove back to the house I grew up in. I used my key, the old one that still worked, and carried my things into my childhood bedroom. It was smaller than I remembered, but it felt like breathing again. Sandra didn't come out of her room. Tyler stayed in the living room, pretending not to notice me. The tension sat thick between us, unspoken but sharp, over the next few days. I learned just how much had changed while I'd been waiting. Bills had been redirected. My dad's mail was gone. Even the garage had been reorganized, his tools replaced with Tyler's gym equipment, but I also noticed something else. Documents left on the counter. Letters in the trash. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Sandra had been busy. Not just remodeling the house, but rewriting the story of who belonged there. And the longer I stayed, the clearer it became. That year she asked me to wait hadn't changed everything. It had revealed everything, and I was done being patient. Living under the same roof as Sandra again felt nothing like coming home. It felt like stepping onto a chessboard mid-game, every move already planned by someone else. She was polite in public spaces, distant in private ones, and sharp whenever the subject of ownership came up. Tyler avoided me entirely, which somehow made everything worse. The third morning after I moved in, I noticed the folder. It sat on the kitchen counter, half covered by mail, thick and beige, with handwritten labels on the tabs. I wasn't snooping at first. I was making coffee when a familiar phrase caught my eye: property valuation. My stomach tightened. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But the moment I saw my father's address typed neatly on the page, I couldn't stop myself. Inside were printed emails, appraisal estimates, and handwritten notes in Sandra's looping script. Dates jumped out at me. Most of them were from months ago. Some from as early as 3 weeks. After my dad's funeral, she hadn't just been preparing to stay, she'd been preparing to sell. That night, I confronted her. We were alone in the kitchen, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I placed the folder on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. She didn't look surprised. "Just tired. You shouldn't go through my things. You shouldn't plan to sell a house you don't fully own," I shot back. She pressed her lips together. "I was exploring options. Options that conveniently excluded me," I said.
Again.
She straightened. "Lauren, I'm thinking practically. This house is too big. Too expensive. Your father always said it would be a burden one day." "He said that to you," I replied. "He told me he wanted me to raise a family here." She flinched. "Things change." "Not wills," I said. "Those don't change unless someone tampers with them." Her eyes hardened. "Careful." That word again. The subtle threat dressed up as concern. "I spoke to the lawyer," I continued. "I know exactly why you asked me to wait a year." She stood abruptly. "You're accusing me of manipulation?" "I'm accusing you of strategy," I said. "And you're bad at hiding it." Silence stretched between us. Then she laughed, short and bitter. "You think you're the first person to fight over property?" "I think I'm the first one you underestimated," I replied. Her smile vanished. "You don't understand how the world works, Lauren. You float from apartment to apartment, job to job. This house needs stability." "And you decided that meant your son," I said. She didn't deny it. That night, Tyler knocked on my door. "I didn't know about the will thing," he said quietly. "I swear." "I believe you," I replied. He hesitated. "She told me you didn't want the house. That you were happy letting it go." I closed my eyes. "Of course she did. I never said that," I said. "I was grieving." "That's not the same thing." He nodded slowly. "She's been under a lot of pressure." "So have I said. He sighed. "She thinks she's protecting me." "And hurting me," I replied. "Both can be true." A week later, I received a letter in the mail. Official. Legal. Sandra was petitioning for primary residency rights, citing continuous occupancy and financial contribution to upkeep. The timing wasn't accidental. She'd filed it 3 days before I moved back in. The realization hit hard. If I'd waited even one more week, she might have won. I met with the lawyer again, this time prepared. I brought proof of ownership, evidence of her early filing, and records showing my intent to return months earlier. "This isn't just a dispute," Mr. Henson said after reviewing everything. "It's premeditated." The words settled in my chest like a stone. When I got home, Sandra was waiting in the living room. "We need to talk," she said. "I know," I replied. "I got your letter." Her face tightened. "I didn't want it to come to this." "You made sure it did," I said. She stood, voice rising. "You're taking everything from my son." "No," I said calmly. "I'm taking back what was always mine." Her hands trembled, not with grief, but with rage. "You think your father would want this?" she demanded. "I know what he wanted," I replied. "And he didn't raise me to be pushed out of my own life." She stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. And in that moment, I understood something important. Waiting hadn't made her bolder. It had made her reckless, and that meant the truth was finally close. The hearing date arrived faster than I expected. Sandra's petition for primary residency was scheduled for the following Thursday, and the house felt different knowing a judge would soon decide who truly belonged there. Every creak of the floorboards, every shared silence in the hallway, felt loaded with meaning. Sandra became openly hostile after I Received the letter. She stopped pretending we were coexisting peacefully. Doors slammed. Dishes clattered louder than necessary. Conversations with Tyler happened behind closed doors, their voices dropping the moment I entered a room. It was like living with someone who had decided I was an enemy occupying stolen territory. One evening, I found my childhood photos stacked neatly in a box by the garage, not thrown away. Not destroyed. Just removed. That hurt more than yelling ever could. I carried the box back inside and set it down in my room. As I flipped through the photos, birthday cakes, missing teeth, my dad's arm always wrapped around my shoulders, I felt steadier. This house wasn't just wood and walls. It was proof. Proof I had roots here long before Sandra ever did. 2 days before the hearing, Tyler knocked on my door again. She's spiraling, he said quietly. She thinks if she loses this, everything falls apart. I looked at him carefully. And what do you think? He hesitated. I think she convinced herself this house was the only way to protect me. But I don't want it like this. Then tell her, I said. He shook his head. She won't listen. Not now. That night, I overheard a phone call. Sandra was in the kitchen, her voice sharp and panicked. No, that won't work. She has copies. I told you she wouldn't fight, but she is. I need something stronger. My stomach dropped. Something stronger. The next morning, I noticed my mail was missing from the entry table. Later, my bank app notified me of a failed login attempt. Then my employer emailed asking to confirm a sudden request for employment verification I hadn't submitted. Sandra wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. She was trying to destabilize me. I called my lawyer. Immediately. This is escalating, he said grimly. Document everything. Change your passwords. And Lauren, do not confront her alone again. That afternoon, I returned home to find the locks changed. My key didn't work. I stood there, stunned, groceries in my hands, staring at the door I'd grown up opening without a second thought. After a minute, Sandra opened it. You can't do this, I said. I can, she replied calmly. This house is still legally mine to occupy. I live here, I said. You can't lock me out. She tilted her head. You don't reside here yet. You're visiting. Something in her eyes chilled me. I called the police. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just factually. When the officer arrived and confirmed my name on the deed, Sandra's composure cracked for the first time. She tried to explain. To justify. To cry. The officer wasn't interested. You can't deny access to a co-owner, he said. Change the locks back. That night, Sandra didn't come out of her room. The hearing was the next morning. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, Sandra gripping Tyler's hand like an anchor. I sat alone, my documents neatly organized. My hands steady despite the storm in my chest. Sandra's attorney painted a picture of a grieving widow who had maintained the home while an absent stepdaughter hesitated. He emphasized continuity, stability, sacrifice. Then my lawyer stood. He laid out the timeline. The request to wait a year. The renovations. The early petition. The attempted lockout. The financial interference. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The judge listened quietly, flipping through evidence, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. This court does not reward manipulation disguised as patience, she said. Sandra's face went pale. The request for primary residency is denied, the judge continued. Furthermore, this court finds evidence of bad faith conduct. I felt my knees weaken with relief. Sandra didn't look at me as we left the courtroom.
Tyler did.
His expression wasn't angry. It was exhausted. Back at the house, Sandra packed silently. Suitcases lined the hallway. She moved through rooms like a stranger already gone. At the door, she turned to me one last time. I was trying to protect my son, she said. You are trying to control the outcome, I replied. There's a difference. She left without another word. That night, I slept in the house alone for the first time since my dad died, and for the first time in a year, I felt like I hadn't waited in vain. The first morning after Sandra left, the house felt unfamiliar in a different way. Not tense. Not guarded. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm passes and you're finally able to take stock of what's still standing. I walked through each room slowly, barefoot on the hardwood floors my dad refinished himself years ago. The walls still held echoes of arguments, of whispered plans, of grief disguised as patience. But beneath all that, the house was still what it had always been: solid, steady, waiting for someone to claim it honestly. Tyler came by that afternoon. He stood awkwardly on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking like someone who didn't know where he belonged anymore. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. "I just wanted to say goodbye." "Come in," I said. We sat at opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt symbolic but not hostile. "She's staying with my aunt," he said. "She says she needs time." "I think we all do," I replied. He nodded. "I didn't know about the residency clause. I didn't know about the lock changes or the calls to your bank." "I swear." "I believe you," I said again. "But belief doesn't undo damage."
He swallowed.
"I know, and for what it's worth." I told her she was wrong. That surprised me. "When?" "After the hearing," he said. I told her this wasn't protection.
It was obsession.
I let that sit between us. "I'm not asking for anything," he added. "I don't want the house. I just wanted you to know that not everyone was against you." "Thank you," I said. And this time I felt it fully. After he left, I stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear down the street. It felt like the final thread tying Sandra's version of events to this place had finally loosened. Over the next few weeks, I settled in properly. I changed the locks legally, finally. I redirected the mail. I repainted my childhood bedroom the soft green my dad always promised we'd get to one day. I reopened his workshop, cleaned the dust off his tools, and fixed the porch railing he never got around to finishing. Each small act felt like reclaiming something Sandra couldn't take: memory, intention, belonging. My lawyer confirmed the case was closed. No appeals. No lingering claims. The house was mine to share or not share, entirely on my terms. Sandra sent one last message. "I hope one day you understand why I did what I did." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I understand. I just don't agree." That was all I owed her. Grief doesn't excuse manipulation. Fear doesn't justify erasing someone else. And real love doesn't come with conditions hidden in legal fine print. A month later, I hosted my first dinner in the house. Nothing fancy. Just friends, takeout, laughter filling the rooms again. At one point, I caught myself smiling at the sound of voices echoing down the hallway, and I realized something important. Waiting hadn't made me weaker. It had shown me exactly who was willing to take advantage of my silence. Sandra asked me to wait a year because she thought patience meant permission. She thought grief meant compliance. She thought I'd choose peace over truth. She was wrong. What I learned during that year wasn't just about wills or residency clauses or property rights. It was about boundaries, about how easily be considerate turns into step aside, about how dangerous it is to assume kindness will be returned in kind. My dad used to say, "People show you who they are when they think you won't push back." I finally understood what he meant. This house is mine now, not just legally but emotionally. It holds my past, yes, but it also holds my future. One built on clarity instead of compromise, on honesty instead of hesitation. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: waiting can be an act of grace, but only if the people you're waiting for deserve it. And if they don't, then waiting ends, and standing your ground begins.